Jenny walked closer and saw the wardrobe filled with women's clothes, most of which were not her size. Curiously, she asked, "When did you get all of this?" Julian didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Get ready. I'm going to another room to change." He then picked up a retro brown suit and left the room. As Jenny observed the clothes, she thought to herself, "This guy never fails to surprise me." She then chose an elegant dress and headed into the bathroom. When Jenny was ready and stepped out of her room, she saw Julian waiting for her outside. As soon as he spotted her, he walked over, wrapped his arms around her waist, and tucked her hair behind her ear. "You look beautiful," he said softly. Jenny blushed slightly and replied, "We should head downstairs. Everyone is waiting for us." Julian took a deep breath, suppressing his desire to stay close to Jenny, and finally let her go. They both made their way to the living room, where Mother Melissa was instructing the servants to carefully load gifts into the car. Jenny was astonished to see so many gifts and thought, "How could my mother-in-law organize all this in such a short time?" As Jenny was lost in her thoughts, Julian tapped her shoulder and said, "Don't overthink my family." "I'm not sure what to say." Jenny smiled at him. "It's okay. They're really nice, and I can see that they love you." She paused for a moment before continuing, "And besides, if it weren't for today, how would I know I was allowed to bully you?" Julian scratched his head and said, "About that, the issue is." Jenny giggled and replied, "Don't try to make excuses, Mr. Julian. Remember, I could just kick you out of the house." Without waiting for his response, Jenny dashed over to her mother-in-law. Julian felt a mix of happiness and worry, happy because Jenny looked so joyful, but worried that he had to be careful not to make a mistake that would leave him sleeping in the garden. With that thought in mind, Julian sighed and joined his family. Seeing Jenny approach, Melissa hugged her and said, "My daughter looks beautiful." Jenny smiled back and responded, "Thank you, Mom." Melissa beamed and said, "Let's go. The car is ready. You, Julian, your father, and I will go in one car, while Grandpa, Grandma, and Daniel will take another." Jenny nodded, feeling increasingly nervous. She didn't know how her father would react to the news that she was left by Raka on her wedding day. Her worry was that this news would spread quickly, and she wasn't prepared to face the reporters. Melissa noticed the nervousness in Jenny's eyes and said, "I know you're worried about your father's reaction, but don't fret. I can handle your father for you. We have a history together, and he cared for me a lot back then. So I think he won't mind if I become your mother-in-law." Andrian's father, who was standing beside them, cleared his throat. He had never liked Romy, his son's mother-in-law. In his eyes, any man who had dated his wife was unacceptable. However, for Julian's sake, he had to maintain a relationship with Romy. Now, with Romy becoming his mother-in-law and frequently meeting his wife, it left him feeling uneasy. Outside the Perwinda house, 3 luxury cars were parked. Jenny looked at Julian with a worried expression. Sensing her gaze, Julian took her hand and said, "Don't worry. Go inside and explain everything to him. We'll wait outside. I'll be by your side no matter what happens." Jenny gave him a faint smile. After taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and headed toward the house. As Jenny entered, a middle-aged woman greeted her, "Miss Jenny." Jenny nodded and asked, "Aunt Linda, where is father?" Aunt Linda lowered her head and replied, "Sir has been very worried about you and hasn't slept all night. He's resting in his room now." Jenny sighed. She had expected this. Nodding, she began walking toward her father's room. "Miss Jenny, sir hasn't eaten anything since yesterday," Aunt Linda said. Jenny felt her body tense at the news. She tried to calm herself and said, "Get me some food. I'll feed him." She paused for a moment and added, "And is there any news about young master?" Aunt Linda nodded, "He'll be back tomorrow." Jenny felt a wave of relief hearing that her younger brother, Yuda, would return. Yuda hadn't attended her wedding because he had opposed her marriage to Raka from the start. He always said that Raka was dishonest, but Jenny had never listened to him. As Jenny entered her father's room, she saw him lying on the bed, looking utterly exhausted. She sat beside him and took his hand. Romy's father opened his eyes, and as soon as he saw Jenny, he immediately sat up and said, "Jenny, you're finally back. I was so worried about you." Jenny understood her father's concern and said, "I'm sorry, father. I've troubled you." Romy sighed and said, "I was really worried and was about to call the police when a good man named Chandra came and told me that you were safe and sound." He then patted his head and continued, "What happened yesterday was terrible. I know you feel bad, but there's no use crying over spilled milk. It's a good thing you didn't marry Raka. He's not worthy of you. My daughter is a precious gem. You deserve someone who knows how to appreciate you. I will never force you to marry again. You should enjoy life." Hearing the word, marriage, Jenny swallowed hard. She struggled to say it, but she knew she had to be honest. "Father, about that," Romy's father interrupted, "I know what you want to say. But don't worry, your father will find a way out. For the sake of business, I won't let Raka bother you. Money can be earned, but dignity is something that, once lost, can never be regained." Jenny was about to say something when there was a knock on the door. Aunt Linda had brought food for Romy's father. Remembering that her father hadn't eaten anything, Jenny quickly began to serve the food. She placed the meal in front of her father and said, "How many times do I have to tell you not to skip your meals?" Romy's father stroked Jenny's hair. After the death of his beloved wife, Jenny had always taken care of him. He then picked up the spoon and started eating. As Romy's father was finishing his meal, Jenny held her breath and said, "Father, I want to tell you something." He looked at her and gestured for her to continue. Jenny took a deep breath and said, "Father, I'm married." He nearly choked on his food and asked, "What did you say?" Jenny looked down, biting her lower lip, and said, "Yes, Father, I'm married." Romy was shocked to see Jenny. Firmly, he grabbed Jenny's shoulders and asked, "Why, Jenny? Why did you do this? Is it because Raka left you and you couldn't accept reality, so you married a stranger?" Jenny remained silent. Romy furrowed his brows and said, "I will not accept this marriage. We will annul it today." He immediately picked up the phone and dialed his lawyer. Jenny quickly snatched the phone from her father's hands and said, "I don't think this will help, Father. We can't do anything about it." Her father felt angry and shouted, "Why can't we? Just because our business is struggling doesn't mean I should be weak. How dare he take advantage of my daughter? I will put him in jail. I'm sure he just wants your money." Thank you all. Have a nice day. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, so that the admin is more enthusiastic to provide entertainment for all of you. See you in the next video.